Welcome to the Mind is Psychic, where we talk music, addiction, comedy, culture. If you like this content, please leave feedback and subscribe. Let's get into it. On today's episode, I'm hitting 20 episodes. Seems like yesterday that I started this, but indeed I started it in November, started doing pre-production probably October, and by December I posted my first episode. I did a little bit of tasters, I think before then, but overall I would say that was the first episode somewhere in December. But with that all said, on this 20th episode, I want to discuss hip-hop production, and the last 30 years of hip-hop, rap, R&B producers. It's not going to be in any particular order. I'm doing it by the decade. I'm going to break them up by 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, and 2020s. There's a plethora of artists. And in 2023, hip-hop celebrated its 50th anniversary milestone, and that was on August 11th, 2023. You got to think, with all those decades, there's probably tens of thousands of producers, mainstream, underground, indie, so it's going to be super difficult to name all those. So I'm probably going to rattle off 25, 30 of the best known to me. So let's get into it. For over 20 years, I have done some type of production, whether it be good or bad. It's something that I have a passion for and only understand 1% of exactly what goes on, because I've always had the project studio. I've always done everything myself, and that's how I've always liked it. I'm one of those that needs to learn all the DAWs, that needs to learn all the inserts, that need to learn everything along with the recording. It was just something that I've always just loved and wanted to understand more. And I have so much respect for producers. Now, when I mean producers, I mean the umbrella. I'm not going to go into each and every type of producer. Most people think that producers are the ones that make the beats. That can be true. A lot are the in-between between the artists and the label. A lot of them do the financing between the studio and the artist, and so on and so forth. Some of them are behind the scenes and don't want the credit. Some of them are famous because they're producers and their name is on everything. Don't get me wrong. None of that is a bad thing. It takes initiative. It takes so much personal victory in a way to do these different tasks. And some do everything. I couldn't imagine that much stress. I couldn't imagine the deadline, because there's got to be deadlines, and the cost of making these albums, hundreds of thousands to millions to tens of millions of dollars that go into this, and everybody wants to recoup their money, the labels, everybody. So I'm sure that the deadlines are very important, no doubt. But after all, we're here to talk about producers. So without further ado, most of these producers are big names, so you've probably heard of them. Most have been in the public eye for some time. I've also added a few underground producers for underground artists and stuff like that, but these beats, the production is just phenomenal, so I wanted to add these dudes in it. And that's why I'm going to talk about them first, because I think they deserve the first spot on this conversation. The first one is a producer named Seven. So I know of him being the in-house producer for Strange Music. If you haven't heard of Strange Music, it's a indie label based in Kansas City, Missouri. It's owned partially by Travis O'Gwin and Tech Nine. When I really got to hear Seven's production and looking into the production credit was a song on Tech Nine's album Ever Ready that came out in 2006. One of my favorite tracks on that was Come Gangster. And that was one of many tracks he produced on that album. Once you hear that, you're going to fall in love on a production end of that. It was awesome. The way he puts together the arrangement, the bass, the strings, and just everything about it is phenomenal. It's about a 6-minute song, very opera-esque, very drumming, bassy, awesome altogether. So that's when I fell in love with his production style. So it's no wonder why many people listened to his productions of different tracks and asked him to produce for them. Some notables are VX, as well as Mac Lethal, and others. And while being the in-house producer for over a decade, he kind of molded Strange Music's sound overall, and you knew what beat he did. It was indistinguishable about the way he makes beats and so forth and does his production. In May of 2020, he left Strange Music after about 14 or 15 years of becoming the mainstay of production at Strange Music. Another indie label, I think, that has awesome production, awesome beats, overall just awesomeness is SRH, company based in LA. Famous acts, Cottonmouth Kings, Hep PE, D-Loc, Daddy X, Johnny Richter, and the list goes on. One of their producers, especially for Cottonmouth Kings, was their DJ, actually, DJ Bobby B, who's phenomenal in his own right. And he was from the era late 90s to early 2000s where they just blew up, especially as a label, and KMK as a group themselves. I just wanted to name them because they just seem to be a part of the SoCal underground scene that I grew up with. Although I didn't partake in the marijuana, I still loved their music. Respect what they did, their craft, their live shows, what they could bring to the hip hop table. Like, put all the weed and stuff like that aside. They actually are very good musicians, rappers, and going back to the production of DJ Bobby B, he brings a lot of skill with that. Now, mind you, these guys aren't using engineers and masters that cost $100,000, to master a track. This is, I believe, all in-house or within the realm of what they're about. It's very real. I think what they bring, their CDs are cool and their music's good, but bringing that raw talent of production is a whole nother the deal, especially since it was way back then. And there's still production has gotten better, but when they were using live drums, and I think a lot of people do, even to this day, even in hip hop, just the different ways the production would be was just very interesting. So that's why I think they deserve a call out too. And I might be biased, but we're gonna say it's all good. Now on to producers from the 80s. I think the first person I want to mention, the most known producer, is Rick Rubin, hands down. Now, there was a lot of producers in that early years that were great. For the major public, I got to think it's Rick Rubin and Russell Simmons. Def Jam, definitely. Def Jam, it was a force to be reckoned with. I mean, you've got the Beastie Boys, LL Cool J, Run DMC. Rick Rubin messed with all of them. So he's probably one of the most legit and most famous, of course, of that time. I mean, he was producing out of his college dorm room and he started along with Russell, which was back in that day, doing all that. I mean, he had a genius mind, being able to make those records, make them sound as good as possible, and for everybody to love them. When he got Aerosmith and DMC, Run DMC, on Walk This Way, I mean, that changed everything. That changed the whole world of music in general. Like back then, who would have thought legitimately that, and literally, a famous rock band like Aerosmith, who at that time wasn't popping off too much, and then this awesome rap group from New York, they were doing this, and it was the collaboration of them and to get them intertwined into a song, and such a great song at that, was legendary. And although that wasn't his beginning, it sure took off. His stardom exploded after that. He just went to the stratosphere. Def Jam went to the stratosphere. Everybody wanted to be on that label. Everybody wanted to be on that label. Def Jam was the label, and then it just kept on growing and growing and growing. And that was for the pure mid to late 80s. Genius and intelligence of Rick Rubin and Russell Simmons and their whole team. They didn't do it by themselves. However, the production, of course, he had a team. I'm sure he had engineers and stuff like that when he got bigger. But for the most part, he did a lot of the stuff himself, which was just putting all that together, just seemed, thinking about it on a music level, in a production. There wasn't anything before it, I don't think. Not at least as popular. And that made a lot of people rethink hip hop, in my opinion. And a lot of people took that as like almost an, okay, cool, let's go ahead and do this hip hop thing. People have been rapping and everything and doing DJing stuff. Producers have been for years and years, even before that. And they were local of each city and stuff. So there wasn't really that huge worldwide fandom and famous people and rappers like there are now. You know, it grew and grew and grew to the point where by 87, 88, you had Ice-T coming out from the West Coast. You had NWA from the West Coast. So many people from the East. I'm more familiar with the West, but I mean, New York is where hip hop started. It is the Mecca. So there's no wonder some of the best producers on the planet come from there. I mean, Pete Rock, Marley Marl, DJ Premier, and the list goes on. I mean, they produced some of the best hip hop in New York. And you can't say New York hip hop, of course, without RZA, famously known Wu-Tang Clan, but been producing, been acting, been just a mainstay for the last almost 35 years or so. And then you have Havoc, another awesome producer. The 90s had phenomenal producers, and you could tell they just got better and better with time and production, whether they had an increased budget, whether they started signing to labels. Anyway, the ability for them to do that was insane. During that time, without this social media, their marketing and their skills. And a lot of times this was before digital. Digital was just coming in, but it was very expensive. So a lot of them were still doing all analog. And that, if you had analog today, I can guarantee you, and still had tape machines, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here doing this because it takes me 20 takes for, 8 bars. I'm kind of exaggerating, but not really. All I'm saying is that the DAW makes it 100% easier, and the skill and the just high praise to them from all the producers working from the 70s, 80s, and 90s into the 2000s. We still use gear, analog style. People love that. Producers love that. And the people that really got into production, especially like EDM and stuff like that, went to the more, as the years went on, went to digital. And then that just flourished. And now they do like a lot of places do like hybrid. So you have some analog and then you incorporate it with the DAW and so forth. None of us in this day and age that's doing music and production, I don't really think that we could run a tape machine, at least not as easy as the DAW, right? So that brings up of course, with technology, that brings up more producers, less of a market share for individual producers in general. So you got to respect the OGs. You got to understand the amount of clarity, the amount of just respect and functionability of what they were able to do back then. It was one of those we can record now with our phones, with our iPhones, with our Androids, whatever. We can hook up mics to this. We have home studios now. Like I'm recording this from a home studio. It's amazing, the technology. It is, though, 90% easier than it was. You have click of the buttons with inserts and all of these, audio adjusters fix background sound and everything like that. And even if you had a home studio back in the 80s and even 90s, you had to be very wealthy because of the cost of the equipment. I mean, people have $1 million home studios. These were mostly, top producers, wealthy artists slash label owners, rock stars, some of the most important industry people on the production side. The few of them were the ones that had home studios because they were just so outrageous. Really, nobody could afford them. Normal people couldn't afford them. And talking about home studios in the 90s, the one and only West Coast legend himself, Dr. Dre, I could make a whole episode just on this guy. The production he does is the top 0.5% of music as a whole, not even hip hop, but as a whole in all genres. He's my number one. The detail of every drum, every synth, every single instrument, every little syllable, just everything is immaculate. Anything he touches is gold, in my opinion. Yes, he has a team. I want to point that out. He's been around for 40 years, so he has some great musicians and producers to assist him and even sometimes take the reins for some of the most important people on his label and on sub-labels, such as Eminem, 50, Kendrick, all of those guys. Their imprints are phenomenal themselves, but that's more of the business, and I'm staying on the production side. And no one can forget about the original Chronic. And Snoop Dogg featured on some tracks before his debut, Doggy Style, came out. Nothing but a G thing. Oh, what an anthem. The song heard around the world, if you will. But even before that, you had NWA and his production on that. Then you go from 92, then to 95. He's starting to get rocky with Death Row, but then they sign Tupac. One of my all-time favorite songs from him is the production he did on California Love, which was on the 96 release of All Eyes on Me, but which came out in 1995, featuring Dr. Dre and Mr. Voice Box himself, Roger Troutman. And for those that didn't know, the sample on that song, well, one of them was from Joe Crocker, named Woman to Woman. Didn't know that for years, that dope piano, those keys, that's a sample. Found that out, honestly, like 2 years ago. I was doing a listening day of just throwing music on and rocking out, and Joe Crocker comes on with Woman to Woman, and instantly, you're like, oh, there it is. Because I've been trying to find the original for so long, and just one day, Jim Crocker comes on, and there it is, the original. Now, of course, it's slowed down a little bit on his song versus the sample. No surprise. That was just something that I've always been looking for, and I found it. I was so excited. So, of course, that song is now in my playlist. However, going back to Dre, he left Death Row in March of 1996, where he then started Aftermath Records. Came out with an album in 96. Didn't do too hot, had like 2 singles, but that's when he started working on Chronic 2001, which came out in 99. And that featured Hitman, Snoop Dogg, Mary J. Blige, Eminem. He also had Cocaine on there, Devin the Dude, Nocturnal, and from his old days in NWA, he had MC Ren and the DOC. And that's just the performers, the artists. We're not talking about the writers, the producer Melman, who co-produced the album. It was a rap juggernaut of an album. Some of the writers, of course, included Eminem, included Lord Finesse as producer, Royce da 5'9" as a writer, even Jay-Z as a writer of Still DRE, which surprised me years later, which makes sense of the writing style, definitely. I'm going to go a few years in the future and discuss will.i.am, Black Eyed Peas, phenomenal, intricate producer, like extraordinaire. And then you have from the 90s, even all the way back to the 80s, you have DJ Quick, Corrupt, Daz Diggler in the 90s. I mean, he pretty much did, him and DJ Quick probably did all the tracks on All Eyes on Me. Now, I'm probably not factual on that. Those two guys in the mid 90s were, oh my gosh, did they have talent. Them putting together those beats, the arrangements, unheard of for those years, you know? And there are just so many others that I know I'm missing, but those are the ones, those are the producers that I've researched the most and read the most about their discographies and so forth. But let me not forget, since we're still in the 90s technically, Timbaland, number 2 on my list, hands down for production. I mean, Missy Elliott. I mean, Timbaland and Magoo. I mean, Aaliyah. So many. I mean, in 96, he was producing for Genuine. I mean, Pony. The list goes on and on and on. And that was just the 90s. You get into the 2000s. I mean, he's starting to produce for Jay-Z, like Big Pimpin'. Yeah, that was him. Then in 2002, he starts working with Justin Timberlake, Cry Me a River, that whole album. And that just starts their relationship. And he just goes on and on and on. And is non-stoppable for probably close to 15, 20 years of nonstop back to back to back, almost like Lil Jon. Of course, he's famous for producing and rapping and being a part of Lil Jon and the East Side Boys. He goes back to the 90s as well, probably further than that. But in 2004, he produces one of the biggest songs of that decade, featuring Usher, Ludacris, and himself. He was and is still the staple of ATL. Now we got someone that came in the early 2000s for the in-house producer of Rockefeller, Mr. Kanye West himself. The Blueprint was just the start. Gift and the Curse. And then in 2004, he comes out with The College Dropout with singles like Through the Wire, which he recorded literally with his mouth wired shut. And you could definitely hear it while he was recording. Amazing. And from that point on, not only was he the producer, he was the rapper, he was the writer. There was no stopping this guy. But you know, I talk about Kanye, Mr. Ye all the time, so I'm going to keep him pretty short because we already know about him. And then from Louisiana, we have Manny Fresh, Cash Money Millionaires, and the list goes on with him. Of course, you got Neptunes, famous for Nelly, famous for Clips, famous for Beautiful by Snoop Dogg in 2003. The list goes on. And now I'm going to talk about some Akon. That dude during the aughts as an artist, I think he had more features than Lil Wayne, or they're neck and neck. He's also an arranger. He's also a producer, a businessman. This guy does it all. So he definitely needs to be put on the spot in this conversation. Scott Storch. He comes in at number 3 on my list of all-time best R&B hip-hop producers. He did Candy Shop by 50. He did Baby Boy by Beyonce, and then kept on making hit after hit after hit. Started getting into drugs, unfortunately. Lost his fortune. Got sober. Has a great story of his sobriety and what forced him to get sober. Hasn't stopped making beats. Hasn't stopped producing. Hasn't stopped making content. Hasn't stopped working. So that just shows you right there that even with addiction and going bankrupt and losing $100 million because you wanted to impress your girlfriends and buy yachts that you can't afford, Bugattis, all of that, living this highfalutin lifestyle. He lost it all, and may he not be the biggest right now. He's still doing awesome things. He's partnered up with Steve LaBelle, and he just keeps on turning out hit after hit. It would be a wonder if he didn't go down that spiral of cocaine and all of that stuff and lost all his everything, friends, family, a fortune. What about if he would have actually not gone through any of that? Where would he be? I mean, he's already easily a top 25, a top 10, a top 5, and some top 1 of some people's list. So know that you can lose everything, get right, get back to feeling happy, get back to being the person you are, being successful. It's just a little fork in the road. You can do it. And he's a great representation of that. Nobody had his back, but he did it. And now let's talk about additional Southern rap superstars / producers. You got DJ Khaled or Khaled, another one. Spent most of his time Louisiana, started doing radio in Miami, all of that good stuff. You know, Terror Squad, that was his big thing back in the day. And he just blew up, got hit after hit after hit. And he's been strong for the last 20 years straight. Does collabs with everybody from Lil Wayne to Justin Bieber to Lil Baby, DaBaby, Post Malone, Megan Thee Stallion, and the list goes on and on and on. Let's not forget about Mike Will Made It. Let's not forget about Juicy J. Let's not forget about DJ Paul. We've got Mustard on the West Coast. Mustard! We got Metro Boomin down south. Boy Wonder, probably most famous for Not Afraid by Eminem. And I know I'm missing a plethora more because there's millions of producers, all love the art, all love to share their art, all love to get their talent out. And there's no better time, especially with the technology. Get your production going. You can do it for a few $100 to a few million, depending on what price range you have. But keep up the work. Keep doing it. Keep putting it out. Spend time on education. AI is not going to ruin this thing. It's going to damper and slow us down a little. Only us humans can do this right. The heart, the soul, the tears, the blood. We've all drained all of that. We've drained our bank accounts because we love this art so much. Not saying to do that. Not saying to do that whatsoever. That's probably the opposite of what I want to say. I want to say don't go into debt for this stuff. You don't need to spend $500 on a mic, $2,000 on an interface, $40, $50 a month on Pro Tools. No, you can use a USB mic to get started. You can use a free DAW. Creativity does not cost money. So on that note, I'm ending this 20th episode wanting to thank everybody for listening, for being by me, for listening to my rants, for listening to everything. I kind of find this as a milestone. This is fun. I really enjoy it. I hope I can continue to do it. I hope I can get my voice out there even further. And I do this 100% by myself, from the mic leveling, gain staging, mixing, mastering, social media. I do all that myself 100%. This is something new. I've always loved doing this, and it's aggravating. It's definitely aggravating sometimes, but it's my passion. That's when I have to tell people, do what you love. If you need to make money, do your 40-hour week job, have a career, even have time for your family and everything like that. The bottom line is you gotta be happy. You can't be going through life always miserable, pouting, bitching, typing hateful stuff on the interwebs. You know what I mean. Love life, love every single day. Just enjoy it. We can all do this. We can do it together. So on that note, let's do what we do best. Live life to the fullest. Thank you for tuning in. Please subscribe and leave a comment. You can hear me on all major platforms and socials under the Mind of Psychic podcast. See you next time.